So these 72 oversouls, what they have done is they've created a hierarchy within the self under the premise of a lie. And what it, in essence, what they are saying and what has been going on for millions of years in these lower, denser realms of which we experience embodiment and death and suffering, is that they will, because they do not want to experience firsthand for their own selves, the knowledge of the lower realms, they create souls again out of the one self that we all share. And when you are created as a soul, you are innocent as Adam and Eve were before the proverbial fall. You were innocent, and in a state from a state of oneness, you've now found yourself in a state of duality. And you have the proverbial Adam and Eve, the male and the female. Now you are, now this is before you have taken on and attached yourself to the serpent, or the DNA that is found and hidden within all organisms. All of what we call living organisms, plants, trees, animals, humans, all has within it the hidden serpent of DNA. And basically, you are told by the soul that creates you that you must now attach yourself or partake of this serpent-like DNA. Attach yourself, let it create a body for you. Now your soul's consciousness is now attached to that embodiment. And you would not have done that had you known that this was something you did not have to experience. But it is all under the premise of a lie. First of all, the serpent is a lie in and of itself, because the DNA embodiment that you now attach yourself, that forms from the embryo into the fetus and into the child or into the animal, whatever that soul from the self attaches itself to now, is veiled from it the reality of the spectrum of freedom that the soul that created it resides in. And that is why souls create other souls, to embody themselves in lower realms. And in the system of reincarnation, what happened was these 73 oversouls, or 72, there were actually 73, but there's one that did not continue. And that's where we get the 72 names of God in the Kabbalah, in the Hebrew Kabbalah. Incidentally, I'm going to digress for a second. There are many cultures that already understand this and saw it through meditation, saw it through intuition. The shamans in the Andes knew about the serpent that is within all things. The Sumerians, if you look at the Sumerians, they have the legend of the Anakai or the Naki. These are the gods that enslave humanity, and they understand the artifact of life. And in some of their drawings, they have the two intertwined serpents, which represents DNA, which basically they knew about through intuition, in much the way Tibetans do when they delve into higher states of consciousness. But anyways, incidentally, the Egyptians also had the pole with the snake intertwined. There's always a serpent in a culture where shamans and intuitives and those who have seen through the veil of Maya and understood what is going on have tried to depict and share. And it's in the Adam and Eve story as well. Adam and Eve partook of the lie of the serpent, and they were cast out of paradise and told they must die. Now they were innocent; they did not understand. Yet they were cast out by the so-called gods who created and said, "Let us make man in our own image." These gods, these whatever you want to call them, guides, your higher selves, watchers in the Druid and in ancient Europe, they call them the watchers. They are lying, basically. They want to experience these lower realms. They want to have the knowledge of it. They do not want to leave the freedom of the light. So they begin this hierarchy of what we call reincarnation. And there are a lot of people who have had near-death experiences, or in Michael Newton's books, talk about Journey of Souls, talk about the groups of reincarnated souls that are on higher realms. Well, each of these souls were begotten originally from an oversoul, sent into a lower realm. And there's not just one lower realm. There are 11, and they each have some form of DNA embodiment in less denser realms of matter and light. And these souls are led down into an incarnation. And I'm going to use myself as an example in some of the discussions, the intuitive discussions I've had with these oversouls. I come from one who calls himself David, and he was begotten from the soul of Ben, who is one of the 72 names of the Hebrew gods, and the 72 Anunnaki, or Anunnaki, the oversouls. And he was begotten from them, led into an incarnation over 3,000 years ago. And when he was released from that incarnation, he ascended to a higher realm. And he was continued in this state of non-knowing that he must progress and evolve through this process of incarnating. But he does not actually do it himself. He was called at first my higher self, the soul which I came from. Now I want to just digress for a second, and I'm going to come back to David, but I remember reading in Gary Zukav's book about the seat of the soul, how he says, there's like the ocean of consciousness, and then there's the cup, which is called the soul. You reach into the ocean of consciousness, which is all one mass of water. This is all an analogy. All connected, all one mass of water. And Gary Zukav says you reach into that ocean, you take out a cup of water. That is the soul. That is the higher self within time and space, within the ocean of consciousness. That is what David called himself, my higher self. He says, I am your higher self, the soul that you will return to. And David is not connected to me at this point. I am a part of that cup of water that David saw as his soul. And he, in turn, took that same water, and Neil Donald Walsh says, you are a fragment of that soul. You come from that higher self, or that soul. And Gary Zukav said that then you are, after your experience and your sojourn in the lower realms is over, you are then added back to that cup. And eventually that cup will be added back to the ocean. And it seems like we all believe in these higher selves. This is the myth of reincarnation. And these souls are created from the oversouls, sent into lower realms. And I'm told that there are 4 planets. Planet Earth is one. There are 4 groups of oversouls, as I've discussed in other videos. And one of the groups started in Pleiades, one in the Andromeda system, one in another system. I do not know where it is at, but there are other planets where this is going on, 4 in total. And on planet Earth, all of the groups are mixed. And we are all here in the lower realms of what the Kabbalists call Malkuth, or what they term, I've heard from them, is called Kagekin. This physical embodiment that we're in, and we come from these so-called higher selves, which in turn also, like David said he was my higher self, comes from an oversoul, one of these oversouls. Now David believed in a lie too. He believed that he must make other souls out of himself, send them down into lower realms, and experience for them. Now after my sojourn here in this lower realm was to be over, then all of the memories that I have, I give to David. David did not create them in this lower realms. He's in a higher realm right now, working on his own. And all of these realms, incidentally, are attached to Earth, and we call them oftentimes the astral planes, or the less denser planes. He's there. He is not making the choices here for me. I came from him. Now I am here in the circumstances that he dished out. The cards from the deck of proverbial playing cards that we all play. He dished me out a hand of cards, and wants to see what I'm going to do with them. And then after I play out the hand the best I can here in this realm, and the embodiment that I've attached myself by attaching myself to the serpent of DNA, and by putting myself in such a realm where now duality is so magnified that I see myself as so separate from it. These bodies are designed to make us perceive duality in such a gross magnification that we believe that everything is totally separate. And that is the proverbial good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, in the Garden of Eden, there's also a tree of life, but we are taught, and also these souls like David, who experienced his only one true incarnation here about 3,000 years ago, he has in turn created other souls out of his self. Out of the self that we all share. And it's not his self, actually. He creates it out of the one consciousness that flows through all things. Souls can create other souls. And so he says he has sent I am the 22nd incarnation of David over the past 3,000 years. But I am not ever David. Each time he has organized from the essence of D, or the essence of consciousness that flows through all things, the one true higher self of all souls, sends that essence into a realm, tells it to attach itself to the DNA, and the bodies grow, and then we, because we are consciousness, we take on the identity of whatever we are attached to, and we begin to believe that this is who we are. So now I am experiencing what David had desired me to experience. I never would have done this had I known what David knew, and David would have never done this had he known what Ben knew, and Ben is one of the 72. They are like the Sumerians have taught the Anunnaki or the Anunnaki. They lie. They have enslaved parts of the self to experience for them. So then David is taught that eventually he will become Ben. That is not a truth. Just like I do not later become David. And in my conversations with David, I know I'm digressing, but I must say I've discovered this, that his personality is not like mine. Now, when I first was formed, David first formed me out of the self. My personality was like his, except for I did not have his memories. I was a brand new soul, just like a brand new child, innocent, and not knowing, just knowing that I existed now within time and space. And he would tell me that my personality that I have in this life is not like his. And so, but he said, don't worry, because when you become one with me, that will be lost, and your memories will now become mine, and you will become me. And that is not a truth either, because I am within time and space a chain of events made of consciousness that has made choices based upon where I've been placed, evolved the best I could in the circumstances that David had led me into in these lower realms. And then I give that to him, that chain of memories, and each of his incarnations that he has led back into his self, telling them that I am yourself, merge with me, become one with me. Each of them have experienced a death. Yes, there is no death in the self, because the self cannot die as one. The one true self, the ocean of consciousness, never dies. But each of those begotten souls do die. Because now they can no longer continue to evolve. And all that they have experienced in behalf of that higher self is now given to that higher self as its memories. But the higher self of David never created them. He led those portions of the self down into lower realms. And see, this is the lie. And then David is taught, and I was told that each of these 72 of these oversouls, these watchers, these fallen angels, and that is what they are, because when they create souls out of the self, they are creating souls in the same way that they were created. Except they don't want to experience the lower realms that they have engineered with the serpent, the DNA. They don't want to experience it, but they want to know it. So each of these souls then create other souls, send them down to realms. Now, when David's embodiment in the lower realms was released, he ascended into a state in the astral. And these souls work in groups now. And they are oversouls as well, but they are under the 72. And they are taught that they must do the same thing. Create other souls, send them into circumstances where they do not want to go. David does not want to be in this life and experience an embodiment where I am. That is why he created, out of the ocean of consciousness, another to do it for him. And the same thing that he had been created by those 72. And these 72 have basically, I am not sure how many, but I'm imagining, and I've been told they are in the thousands. I am imagining they are in the hundreds of thousands of these souls that have once experienced the denser realm, one of the denser planes of embodiment, died. Not really died, but their embodiments died. They were released into the higher planes of the earth or one of the other 3 planets where this is being done. And they are taught that in order to evolve, they must continue to do the same thing that was done to them, because they know nothing else. And so they continue to do unto other parts of the self what they would not have done themselves. They are what we call our higher selves. And the 72 are the higher selves of those souls. And yes, in Michael Newton's book, he talks about life between lives, how we work in groups. He calls them we. He says you will someday die, and this is all based upon intuitive readings and hypnosis and things that have been remembered from near-death experiences. Basically, what we're taught is that we have a soul that exists beyond our embodiment and our higher self that is still free in higher realms of the astral. When our embodiments are released, these incarnations will then be added to their experience. They are free while this is going on. And they work in groups. And they continue to do the same thing that was done to them, and are taught that eventually they will become one with that which created them. David will someday become Ben, and then become like God. Ben was created out of the self the same way that David was. Ben knows that. And David did not. And I asked David, how did you create me out of yourself and send me here? And he says the same way that Ben created me. Yet my sojourn within time and space is only subject to what I am given in these lower realms. And then my soul will die by giving it to the higher self that proclaims it to be my soul, as David. And eventually David will die too. And he will in turn give the essence of everything that he has accumulated through all of the souls that he has sent into lower realms that he calls incarnations, to that which is an oversoul, which was in his case Ben, one of the 72 that began this lie. This is a lie. And not one of the 72 ever personally experiences the lower realms themselves. They have devised a system of groups within the astral that send souls here, and they keep them in ignorance. They tell them that there are angels. Angels are different from us, they say. That is a lie as well. In Judeo-Christian culture, we're taught that there are angels. And I asked David, and I've also asked Ben in my communications months ago with Ben. I asked Ben, what are angels? Are they like us? No, they are different. And that is a lie as well. She said they are different because they never enter these lower realms. And, well, how are they created? They're created the same way that the 72 were. And the 72 are angels. Yet the difference between the 72 and the hundreds of billions of angels that never so-called do this reincarnation cycle and create souls out of the self and send them into lower realms and then strip them of their individuality and draw them back to their essence. And the reason why they're angels is because they never do this. Yet they are not any different than any soul that has ever incarnated on any of the planes. They are not any different than any of the higher souls that sent and created those incarnations out of the self. Every soul, every incarnation in lower realms, every soul that incarnates and has ever incarnated in the lower realms was created within time and space as a soul, the same as the 72 were. But the 72 have devised it in such a way that the only way that eternal life will be found is by merging with them. And their plan is to eventually have all of the memories of every group that is working in the astral as their own experiences. And they don't ever have to suffer. And they forever remain in the light. So in essence, every soul that has ever entered the realms of these lower planes and been beguiled by the serpent of DNA and embodied within lower realms, and then does it to other souls because it does not want to do it either. It just wants to continue. It's told the lie that that is how we evolve, and that is not true. They abuse the way that angels are procreated. All souls are angels. And an angel is a part of time and space that is created within duality of the one, that is given the same as the one. It is a microcosm of the one. And the one beyond time and space that we all come from, that we all are enfolded from, never dies. It never has an end where it has stopped evolving for itself. And an angel exists within the one as a microcosm of that, and is created within duality, and forever remains within duality. It knows itself as both the one and the one within duality. It knows itself in what the Hebrew culture is called the state of Merkaba, one who is both the microcosm and the macrocosm, neither of which ever die. One exists within time and space, and the other is the macrocosm from which we all come, that is beyond. And you can know yourself as both. You do not have to give up your state of duality, your perception of acting for yourself forever within time and space, to know yourself as the one you are beyond. And that perfect harmony of knowing yourself as the macrocosm and the microcosm is the state of Merkaba. That is what angels are. That is what you are. Yet that is not what you were given. Because there is another tree within the proverbial, within the proverb, or the story of the Garden of Eden, called the tree of life. And the gods that created and cast Adam and Eve into these lower realms of death and suffering, they guard that tree of life. Now this is all just a metaphor, but the tree of life is forever living. They are the only ones who partake of that. They know good and evil, but they've never experienced it because they've never actually incarnated their souls into time and space, into one of these incarnations, and then had an end to it. They don't know what death is firsthand. They only know the knowledge of it. So they are what we have been called through the lie of all humanity, the gods. And they are no more gods than you are. This is a lie. You are as they are, except for they don't want you to know that. And so basically now, since they have devised this hierarchy, these 72 out of the hundreds of billions of angels that never partake of this, they have devised a hierarchy in which now the self, as souls, as the 72, these angels, create other parts of the self, send them into lower realms, and they are using the essence of which we are all made of, which is one, the one higher self, and doing unto the higher self what they do not want to have firsthand within time and space. They are no longer behaving as a microcosm within the macrocosm, because they're creating death and suffering. And that is why there is death and suffering. And that is also why it continues with the souls that are then released from an incarnation, return into the higher states of the astral, and then continue to evolve by creating other souls to enter time and space in their behalf, and doing the same thing that the oversouls do. And you know, in Michael Newton's book, he talks about what they call the elders, or the highest, the ones who watch over the whole entire process of all of the groups that are working in higher realms and sending these souls down as incarnations. Incidentally, I want to remind you again that even if you read Michael Newton's books, or any book that talks about the higher self, including Gary Zukav's books, The Seed of the Soul, the higher self does not actually incarnate here. So it sends and creates parts of the self to do it for it, just like the oversouls did to those higher selves. And those higher selves are then told the same lie, that they must then eventually become like the gods. In order to do it, they must become one with those 72. Now those 72 never become one with the other angel souls. They are forever free to act and live within the self. They never firsthand experience pain, sorrow, suffering, and death. And we don't have to either. But we do, and even in beyond our physical embodiments, if we return to these higher realms of the astral and believe the lie that we are less than them. The only way we will know what they know is if we become one with them. But the truth is, once you become one with them, you are not them. All you have been through your sojourn within time and space is a memory fragment of consciousness. And now you give that memory fragment to them. So now they can experience everything that you have ever experienced, either through your own first-hand incarnation in the lower realms or through the souls that you have sent and created in your behalf that are now one with you. And they never have to do it. They don't want to do it. The highest realm of the astral, where souls and angel souls have first evolved in self-awareness, is a state of freedom and joy and endless potential. Not a realm of suffering nor death. And they don't want to leave that realm and experience this. They just want to know of it. So they have enslaved humanity, and I'm not just talking about humans. They incarnated and have incarnated as animals as well, and work in groups. Some of these oversouls work in groups where they incarnate as animals, species of animals, and experience that. Some of them humans. Everything is being brought back to these 72 who are angels that are doing unto the self what they do not want to have done to their own souls firsthand. That is why I term them as fallen angels. Now, beyond your own physical embodiment, and I told David, I said, I've had conversations with the soul that I have been created from, that called himself my higher self. I asked him, I said, when was I first created? Do you remember the moment you first created me out of was it before my body was born here as a baby? And yes. And I was instructed that I must, in order to become free, attach myself to DNA, attach myself to the embodiment of an embryo, and then that grew into a fetus within my mother here in this realm. And I was led to believe that when I was released, I would be free, just like David. But I would never be free, because what happens is then David draws me into his essence of his soul. Now David does this as many times as he desires, and not just in the realm of Kageken or Malkuth, but in also more subtle realms with other incarnations. And I've talked about these realms in some of the videos on the channel called The Essence of D. And then eventually, when David wants to become more than what he thinks he is, he will give his soul experience and everything that he has accumulated through the incarnations of other souls that have become one with him back to these 72. And he will end his ability to forever act within time and space as a soul, as an angel. And you may say, well, he's not dying because he's becoming one with Ben. That is not a truth. Ben sees herself, has her own personality. In fact, I've been told that the soul of Ben that has millions. Right now I was told there are, in the groups that are incarnating under the oversoul of Ben, at least 44 million people on the earth at this time in the year 2008, 2009, that will eventually all merge back into their higher selves, and those higher selves will eventually merge back into Ben. Ben is a female. Male sees himself as male. David sees himself as male. He has chosen that personality for himself after his first incarnation. But when David merges all of that he has experienced through his own experiences in the higher realms and his one incarnation here firsthand, and the incarnations he has sent down here after him that have merged with him, he will see himself as Ben, but he will not see himself at all. He has just created a chain, a fragment collected within his self, a fragment of other souls who have been created and died, and have all of their memories stored in David's higher self. David then gives it to Ben, and David is now dead. Now, there is no corpse, but David is dead, because now David can never forever act within time and space as an individual and forever evolve. Now it is only Ben that partakes of the tree of life. And that is why these 72 gods, so-called gods, they call themselves gods, and they have in all the cultures. That is why they are the only ones to experience eternal life. Yet they are not different from those that they have created. Every soul that is ever created by one of these oversouls is an offspring of the self within time and space. and should be allowed and not barred from the tree of life, and should be able to forever act like those oversouls. But they tell us we are less. They can only carry out this whole entire scheme of lying and beguiling souls to do for them what they do not want to do for themselves but have the knowledge of, by telling us we are less, and setting up a hierarchy or a system in the lower realms of the astral where we perpetuate that lie. It is a lie. And the hundreds of billions of other angels, there are only 72 out of the hundreds of billions of angels that forever live within the self that have done this. And they are looked down upon because they are creating other souls within time and space and teaching those other souls to do the same thing, telling them that they must embody their offspring into lower realms and then draw them back into their essence, and then someday those higher selves will be drawn back into these 72. They are creating other souls within time and space and not giving it the same eternal life that those 72 have been given by other angels that created them within time and space. And that is why I term them as fallen angels. And in the process of this, now we have perceptions of death and suffering, not just on the planet Earth. I have been told that in Pleiades, in the Pleiades system, there is a planet where one of the groups comes from. The 72 have 4 groups, and I've talked about this in my other videos. And Andromeda has another group that comes from Andromeda. And the 22 souls of the Kabbalistic group that came up with the Kabbalah, the 22 of them joined the other 50, and now there are the 72 names of God. Excuse me. These oversouls are creating perceptions of suffering and death within the one self that we all share, because they are doing to the self what they do not want to have done to their own self. No soul desires to suffer, nor die. That is why the 72 neither suffer nor die firsthand. In order for them to experience these things, and incidentally, I've been told again, I want to reiterate that I've been told that they do this not out of a desperation to figure out what love means. There is no end to joy. And there is no end to evolving in joy. But they were curious. And they wanted to set themselves up as gods. And tell everything that they create, every soul that has been created from them, that eventually gives all of its experiences back to them, that in order to have the tree of everlasting life, you must be me. But the lie is, you never will be. You are dead. Once you give yourself back to a soul that created you, you are dead within time and space, because you can never, ever continue to evolve and grow. And every event that is recorded that has ever transpired within the realm of duality in these lower planes, all of the memories of these events are eventually given back to those 72. All of the memories of the sufferings of animals and the lives of humans, eventually all of those souls, the 72, receive them all, but never have to do it themselves. So in essence, they have done to the self what they would not want done to their own souls. That is the only way suffering can exist. The only way that suffering and death exist, and perceptions of suffering within the self, is if you see